What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy. Want to wish you a very happy third day. It is Thursday, the third day, April the 3rd, appropriately, 2025. If you don't understand that reference, it's over 20 years old, and that's okay. Sometimes we all just, we like the things that we like, and we stick to the things that we stick to. The Dallas Cowboys don't seem to stick to anything, apparently, according to this offseason, at least. That is nothing like what last season was, or last offseason, I should say, last season as well. We have a lot to get to relative to what the Cowboys did on Thursday, and really to kind of dive into it as far as how it is representative and emblematic and a bit of a microcosm of the potential change in disposition to date. But in case you're new around here, I'm live in the Bleacher Report app every single Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's every Tuesday, every Thursday across the calendar year. There are a handful of exceptions, like last Thursday, for example. I was at Astros opening day. They got the dub then. They got the dub just now in Minnesota. So basically a wonderful time to support the best baseball team in all of the land. But I'm here every Tuesday, every Thursday. You can watch them live in the Bleacher Report app. You can follow me down below in the Bleacher Report app. See all the teams I root for, including the Stros. You can also follow me on social media, X, Instagram, and Threads at RJ Ochoa. TikTok is rj.ochoa. Search for RJ Ochoa on Blue Sky. Email is rj.ochoa@sbnation.com. All right, let's begin. In case you did not see it, and I doubt that's true because you have the Bleacher Report app, and Bleacher Report helps make sure you stay caught up on everything. The Dallas Cowboys made a trade on Thursday morning, pretty early in the day. Maybe you were just kind of getting the workday started. Multiple reports all over the place. Every single national insider noting the Cowboys were trading for former New England Patriots quarterback Joe Milton. That's right, Joe Milton of Michigan, Joe Milton of Tennessee, the same Joe Milton who was really exciting people ahead of the draft process a year ago with his athleticism, with his mobility, with everything he was able to do. He played in a game, and he was ultimately a fifth-round pick of the Patriots, a sixth-round pick of the Patriots last year, but the Cowboys paid a fifth-round pick to acquire him. The Cowboys also got a seventh-round draft pick in return. That makes 3 trades, in case you aren't keeping track, this offseason for the Cowboys, and 3 trades specifically in which they acquired a veteran, obviously, but where they gave away a day 3 pick and not only got a veteran player, but ultimately also got a pick in return. The Cowboys have kind of made a habit of dropping spots as far as draft picks are concerned in the name of acquiring veteran talent. Look, I'm not going to stand up and clap here with you because I've already set the frame and everything's kind of perfect. I mean, the show has to go on. But I tweeted earlier on Thursday morning when, kind of all of Cowboys Nation on the internet was responding with universal praise to this. There were the, kind of handful of, people throwing tomato cans or whatever. I don't know why you would be pissed about this. I don't know how you can't. Actually, it's more than to not be pissed. I don't know how you can't feel like this is a brilliant move from the front office. Now, we can separate multiple things. We can say that the Cowboys front office has, for the most part, over the last almost 15 years, been rather lazy, rather incompetent. In fact, if you listen to the Athletes First podcast that was making the rounds this week, shout out to Brandon Laurie, one of our staffers of Blogging the Boys, for aggregating a lot of important elements and important factoids and pieces from that conversation. But if you watch that interview or listen to that interview or read Brandon's article at bloggingtheboys.com, or the one that Danny Phantom wrote at our site as well, you should be reading BTB 24/7, 365, by the way. If you pay any attention to that, you know that the Cowboys are kind of bringing, nothing to the negotiation table when it comes to modern NFL negotiations. It seems so easy. You don't have to be, and I mean all due respect to the profession of being an agent in the NFL. My implication here is not that it's easy or that I could do it, but it does seem somewhat easy to negotiate against the Dallas Cowboys because they don't have any interest in capitalizing on anything that can work to their benefit. And this was the exact opposite of that. In fact, I would say that this is representative of a change in philosophy across this offseason, specifically that is representative of that. Now, my point to you is not everything's fixed. The Cowboys are perfect. That jersey you wanted that you put on hold because we were all pouting, you can buy that now. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the Cowboys are doing a lot of things that suggest and signal they kind of understand this. They still have many flaws. They still need to do a lot of things. There's still no excuse for why Micah Parsons, my fellow Bleacher Report content creator, does not have a brand new contract extension, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, right? My list of transgressions for this team is very, very, very long, but we have to be fair. We have to be objective, and we have to, kind of stick to what happens. And if we look at this Joe Milton trade and what the, kind of status of the trades the Cowboys have pulled off so far this offseason are, then yeah, I think it's worthy of a standing ovation relative to this context, right? You can't just say, oh, the Cowboys are brilliant. Nobody is saying that. What we are saying is that this was an amazing trade. Consider that on Thursday morning, before we look at the kind of offseason as a whole, let's kind of talk about the Joe Milton of it all. Thursday morning, the quarterbacks in the Dallas Cowboys roster were Dak Prescott and Will Grier. I love Will Grier. Will Grier is awesome. Will Grier is great. I would love to see Will Grier become something, right? I think we all really like Will Grier, but I don't think that any of us think that that's going to happen. I don't think that any of us, if the Cowboys were in a pinch and had to rely on their backup quarterback, and let's also be fair and objective here, you will not find somebody who will, ride into the gates of Babylon, is that the expression, on behalf of Dak Prescott more than me. I am at the front line of that army, right? But if we're being fair, Dak Prescott has missed a lot of time. Dak Prescott obviously missed time in 2020. He missed a single game in 2021. He missed a handful of games in 2022. He didn't miss any time, obviously, in 2023, his best individual season. And he missed a lot of time last year with the hamstring. And I said hamstring because you look at all these injuries. In 2020, it was the ankle. In 21, it was the shoulder situation. In 22, it was the thumb. Last year was the hamstring. This isn't one thing. This isn't one ailment. It's not a hamstring popping up all the time. It's not an ankle or a shoulder or an arm that's continually bothering him. Like Tony Romo, not that that was an easy thing to navigate, but it was continually his collarbone, his back. Like it was kind of isolated in one general body part. And so you have to kind of play the odds. You have to kind of assume that you have to have a backup quarterback who can play because Dak Prescott has proven that. Unfortunately, we obviously hope that that doesn't happen here. But because of that, Will Grier was the guy. Had the Cowboys had to depend on somebody as of Thursday morning in a game without Dak Prescott, it would have been Will Grier. Now, to be clear, I don't think that Joe Milton can go out and win a football game. But I do think that Joe Milton is a slab of a material that is worth molding, is a slab of a material that is worth investigating, that is worth figuring out. And I always believe that quarterbacks should have, especially offensive-minded coaches, and that obviously applies to Brian Schottenheimer. I thought that this applied to Mike McCarthy. I mean, these coaches should have their franchise quarterback, obviously, but they should also have somebody who they're developing in parallel. And I recognize that it's not vogue to give Mike McCarthy credit for anything, but I do think that Mike McCarthy's career in Green Bay, and even to a small degree in Dallas, worked that way. And I liked that about Mike McCarthy. I loved in his first season, which was 5 years ago now in 2020, the Cowboys obviously had Dak Prescott. They signed Andy Dalton in free agency. They drafted Ben DiNucci. They had somebody of kind of every cut and every mold. And I thought that that was really wise and really smart. And that kind of changed over time. And Cooper Rush came in, and I was really against that when it happened. But obviously he proved me wrong by winning, a lot of games when the Cowboys called upon him. But Cooper Rush is gone, right? Cooper Rush is in Baltimore now. God bless him. Good for him. We're rooting for Cooper Rush, obviously. And so the Cowboys had to have that answer. And they had to have that person, that player, that specific quarterback who Brian Schottenheimer could get his hands on and put his stamp on. And Joe Milton, like I said, a year ago, I mean, just search for any tweets, right? A year ago, there were a lot of people who thought highly of Joe Milton in terms of his prospects in the NFL. And I would offer that even 6 months ago, there were Patriots fans who still felt that way. I recognize that the season went south for them pretty quickly. But Joe Milton, the reason this trade is so brilliant, so cunning, so forward-thinking, so creative from the Cowboys is because he was a rookie last year, which means he has 3 years of team control left on his contract. That is a long time, and it times up nicely with Dak Prescott. The Trey Lance trade was horrible. We all understand that, and the idea that it was any sort of leverage against Dak Prescott is silly at the very best. But Trey Lance, his contract at the time when the Cowboys acquired him, expired at the same time as the contract that Dak Prescott was on at that particular point in time. This works out wonderfully. The Cowboys now have 3 years to assess and figure out Joe Milton and to develop him and whatever the case may be. And we all, whether you are a fan of Dak Prescott or not, can logically comprehend and understand that the Cowboys are committed to Dak Prescott for that 3-year stretch. So nothing is a threat to anything else. It all makes sense. It's all pointing in the same direction. It's all running parallel towards the same goal. Again, if you follow me, whether it's here or on social media, you know that my criticism of the Cowboys last year, and I've repeated it many times because it's important, was that they did not have a North Star. I'm fine if I disagree with your North Star, but at least all your motivations and intentions have to be in the same direction. And that was not the case for the Cowboys last year. Getting Joe Milton keeps you in line, keeps you on the same trajectory, keeps you pointed towards the same North Star, which is why I like it. What's more is the Cowboys gave up a 5th-round pick, cool pick, 171 overall. I know that you think that that's going to be something special if you're somebody who's pouting about this, but they got a pick in return. They got 217 on the way back, which is really, or was it 217? It's already escaped. I think it was 217. We're about to look at it, but or was it 247? Whatever the case, we're about to pull it up in an exact measure. But my point here is the Cowboys have executed 3 trades this offseason for Kaiir Elam, for Kenneth Murray, and now for Joe Milton. And in each of them, they used day 3 picks because they picked up 4 compensatory picks, which gave them 10 selections in the NFL draft. And each time they got a pick in return. And this particular thing with Joe Milton, let me be very clear. I think it's very silly when the Cowboys try to weaponize the star or playing for the team or act like they're better and players should take a discount because they're the Cowboys. That is so silly. But in this particular case, on this particular day, it does seem like the Cowboys may have benefited from being themselves. Jordan Schultz reported that his understanding was since Joe Milton became available at the start of the season, the Giants, Raiders, Eagles, and Steelers all had interest in him, including obviously the Dallas Cowboys. He noted the Patriots had a better offer for Milton, but chose to send him where he wanted out of respect for him. That is very cool. I mean, I think that is, kind of a good move on the Patriots. And a lot of people were wondering, like, well, why are the Patriots moving on from him? I don't understand this. If he's really this great, if he's really this awesome, if I'm really supposed to be this excited about Joe Milton, why are the Patriots moving on from him? Well, the Patriots are trying to commit fully to Drake May, and the Patriots notably have a new coaching staff. Joe Milton was not their guy. And so sometimes that's just the way things go. They were ready to kind of move on. But like I said, I wanted to get here because I do think this is worth talking about. And no, I'm not saying the Cowboys are on the same level of forward-thinking mindsets in terms of where the Philadelphia Eagles are, the Baltimore Ravens, or the Buffalo Bills. They're not there. Most teams are not there. They are the 1 or 2 of 2, relative to the NFL, which is why they have the successes that they do on a year in and year out basis, and why the Eagles are defending Super Bowl champions, among many other things. But the Cowboys have done something very wise, very astute, and I will actually say very shrewd. I think the word shrewd is often something that comes with a negative connotation. I mean it very positively here. We bag on the Cowboys, rightly so, for saying things like, well, it depends on the price, because sometimes it's okay to overpay, right? Like, do you think that, I don't know, do you think the Eagles feel like, man, you know what, we really overpaid, this guy or that guy? No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you overpay anybody, as long as at the end of it all, you're the ones raising the trophy up. So it's okay to overpay sometimes, but it's also okay to stick to your guns and make sure you get the price that you want. And that is seemingly what the Cowboys have done, not just with the Joe Milton trade, but with all of the trades that they've executed this offseason. So let's take a look here. And you can check this out at blogontheboys.com. This is obviously an article that I wrote. These are the Cowboys draft picks. And this has gotten very complicated, obviously, because of the fact that the Cowboys have been moving and grooving and wheeling and dealing so much this offseason. But their first 4 picks in the draft are untouched. And they obviously don't have their original 4th-round pick because of the Jonathan Mingo trade. We've discussed that ad nauseum. We don't need to relitigate it. All right. Good vibes only today. So Cowboys then have the 174th overall selection, which is a 5th-round pick. That was a comp pick. Remember, the Cowboys did get 4 comp picks that happened right before free agency officially began, before the new league year officially began. We actually had a live show in the Bleacher Report app that went up on YouTube. I think it went up on YouTube. We may have had technical difficulties that day. But either way, we did a live show the day that the comp picks came out. So they still have 174, although they gave up 171 to the Patriots on Thursday. They have 204 overall, which is a pick they got from Buffalo when they obviously traded for Kaiir Elam. They have 211 overall. These are 6th-round picks now, and that's their own comp pick. That has not been moved, obviously, since it became theirs. Then we've got what happened today, the 7th round. I was right, 217 overall. I should have remembered, or should have committed in my memory, 217 overall. That comes from New England, originally belonged to Tennessee. That's a part of the Joe Milton trade. Then the Cowboys have 239 overall, which is from the Kenneth Murray trade. Again, remember the Cowboys moved down. They turned a pick into another pick and a veteran when it came to Kaiir Elam, Kenneth Murray, and as of Thursday, Joe Milton. Finally, I mentioned Jonathan Mingo. The Cowboys did send a 4th-round pick, their original 4th-round pick, to the Panthers in exchange for Jonathan Mingo. But in case you forgot, they did also get Carolina's 7th-round draft pick, which is why they have it now. And in case you're wondering, well, where is Dallas's 7th-round pick? Because I told you that they don't have their 4th because they sent it to Mingo. When the Cowboys traded back in the 1st round last year during the night of the 1st round of the NFL draft, when Detroit came up and Dallas moved down and still took Tyler Guyton, and they got a 3rd-round pick, which they used on Cooper Beebe. It was in that particular transaction, Dallas moved down and also gave up their 7th-round draft pick this year, their original. So they have 3 7th-round draft picks now, but none of them originally belonged to the Cowboys. And so this was another point that I listed here in the article that, again, needs to be remembered, needs to be at least discussed, needs to be said out loud. The Cowboys dropped back 34 spots in order to acquire Kaiir Elam. They moved from 170 to 204. They dropped 51 spots to acquire Kenneth Murray, which was the lowest price they had to pay the highest price they had to pay, relatively speaking. They went from 188 to 239, and they dropped 46 spots in order to acquire Joe Milton. So the Cowboys on Thursday, for dropping 46 spots on a pick that they did not originally have, because again, this was a compensatory pick. The Cowboys used a pick that they did not originally have to only drop 46 spots and pick up a backup quarterback with 3 years of team control over him. And not just a backup quarterback, but somebody who has a lot of potential, somebody who has a lot of excitement, somebody who has a lot of pizzazz, somebody who has a lot of elements that we really like in him. And I think that is, again, worth giving them a round of applause for, because these are things that have not been happening on a regular basis to the Dallas Cowboys for a very, very, very long time now. And look, we don't know the way the NFL draft is going to go, but I do want to say that we said as of Thursday morning, if you've done any mock drafts yourself or anything like that, I know you were spending a day 3 pick on a quarterback. Maybe you were drafting Quinn Ewers or something, whatever. And you were telling yourself, well, the Cowboys need a backup quarterback, so I have to get one. They took care of that. The Cowboys had questions at the beginning of this offseason at linebacker, which they've addressed twice over, at running back, which they've addressed twice over, at defensive tackle, which they've addressed twice over, at backup quarterback, especially after Cooper Rush left, which they have now addressed. Outside of wide receiver, that's the only position of need that they haven't really kind of attacked. No offense to Paris Campbell, because they let Brandon Cooks go home to the New Orleans Saints. That's the one position that the Cowboys have kind of let be a little obvious, a little bit of a blinking red light ahead of the draft. And maybe that means they're taking T-Mac out of Arizona. Maybe it means they're taking, Ibuka out of Ohio State. Like there are options, obviously. There are a lot of receiver options, but the Cowboys are not really telegraphing anything, which is different for them. And I think that the Cowboys have done a really good job of, outside of the moments that Jerry Jones has spoken. And we had a show, obviously, on Tuesday, and that was a bad day for the Cowboys because of the not knowing David Mulligat's name and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. But there was a tidbit that came out in the aftermath of the Joe Milton trade that I think is really interesting. Shout out to ESPN's Todd Archer. Let me zoom in so you can see this here. Todd tweeted out, the Cowboys had interest in adding Jacoby Brissett in free agency, but he signed with Arizona. They also discussed the possibility of Drew Lock. Joe Milton is under contract for 3 years and much lower numbers, betting on the upside on the Patriots' 6th-round pick last year. Now, where was this report during free agency, right? Where was this at all, at any point, at any single moment? Where did you see that the Cowboys had interest in Jacoby Brissett or Drew Lock? And I would have been a fan of those moves, to be very clear here. I've said this many times. The archetype of backup quarterback that I like the most is somebody who has been there, who has done that, who has started games in the NFL, who is still relatively young and therefore has a little bit of potential, has a little bit of lottery ticket upside. Now, Joe Milton is much closer to the lottery ticket upside of the spectrum, than Drew Lock or Jacoby Brissett. But Drew Lock and Jacoby Brissett are players who have started games in the NFL, who, if you had to, like I said, in a moment, depend on, it would not be the brightest of bright lights for them. That's not necessarily the case for Joe Milton, although you could argue he played some big games in the Big Ten and the SEC. We make that argument on behalf of quarterbacks all the time. So that being said, this was kind of a brand new nugget that wasn't anywhere. And you know what? Kudos to the Cowboys. This was not anywhere. And I know that Todd Archer is just reporting that the Cowboys had interest, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, this is, if you had told me, if you had made me swear to secrecy when this was happening, when the Cowboys' interest in Jacoby Brissett and Drew Lock was materializing in real time, if you had sworn me to secrecy and said, okay, it's either going to be one of those two or a trade for Joe Milton, I would have absolutely said trade for Joe Milton. I still obviously, but I would have preferred that over signing Jacoby Brissett or Drew Lock. Now, I can make the arguments because I already just did for Brissett or for Lock, given their experience in the NFL, their experience starting games, if you have to depend on them, the fact that Dak Prescott's a bit of an injury question, right? We've discussed that already here today. But I still, especially, you can use the Dak Prescott injury thing to argue a number of different things, right? You can use it to say, well, the Cowboys might need a starter in a few years, and I want 3 years to figure out if Joe Milton is that guy, because that was not the case with Trey Lance because of the contractual situation with Lance. And I would use this past year as an unfortunate example for Trey. When the Cowboys obviously saw Dak Prescott go down, there were a lot of people who in situations like that say, I don't care, I want to win every game and blah, blah, blah. And you have the team tankers and all this stuff. But the Cowboys obviously were very committed to trying to win, right? We know that now. And they obviously, were somewhat successful in that endeavor, obviously winning a few games with Cooper Rush. But had Joe Milton been on the roster, obviously he would have been a rookie. But let's pretend, this was the same situation but different, right? Let's pretend that Joe Milton was in his second season. The Cowboys had traded for him. That would have made sense. That would have made sense to play Joe Milton because you could have told yourself, well, you have 2 more years of team control over this player after this year. It's very much worth getting some information on him and understanding who he is and what he can offer to the team in the future. That argument didn't apply to Trey Lance because he was set to be a free agent at the end of last season. And obviously, the reports were that he's checking out Canadian football, and best of luck to Trey. But again, that was why the Trey Lance trade was so silly, because it was ill-timed. It was not forward-thinking. And maybe the reason that we think this is so impressive is because the last instance in which the Cowboys acquired a backup quarterback was literally done in the most inefficient way possible. But this, I mean, I've already demonstrated, but I cannot demonstrate enough how completely polar opposite different this particular trade is relative to the Trey Lance one. The argument for Trey Lance at the time, if you were making one, and some people did, was that the Cowboys spent a 4th-round pick, which was a bit of a premium property, but they spent a 4th-round pick, which wasn't a top 100 selection. They spent a non-top 100 selection on a potential lottery ticket. I like that idea. I like taking a flyer. I like saying, man, this guy was highly thought of at one point in time. Let's see what he has. But the problem with that is it was not a player who you could actually see, especially because the Cowboys acquired him, if you recall, at the very end of the preseason. It was the night, speaking of Will Grier, before the Cowboys' final preseason game in which Dak Prescott served as offensive coordinator and called plays for Will Grier, who was playing the position. So you didn't even get that training camp or that preseason to see what Trey Lance looked like for the Cowboys or with Mike McCarthy. It took over a year, or not over, but about a year, to finally get a chance to see what Trey Lance looked like. It just simply was not done in a proper way. The fact that you have traded for Joe Milton now, before any of the offseason programs begin in earnest, so that he has all that opportunity, so that he has all the time at training camp, so he has all the time in the preseason, check, 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 check. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. I love it. 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 I cannot tell you enough, again, how wise this was, especially relative to the way they've done it in the past. But I think it's wise in general. I'm not saying, watch out, here come the Cowboys, here comes number 6, they're going to win the Super Bowl. That's not the point. But this was done in a very brilliant way. And if we're adding cherries on top of the Sunday, Stephen Jones said on Monday at the owner meetings in Florida, he said, yeah, we're still looking at the veteran trade market and we really want to add a backup quarterback. He shot his shot. He called his shot, actually. And then he shot his shot and he made his shot. I mean, good for Stephen Jones. I don't know how many opportunities we'll ever have again to say, dude, Stephen, you did it, man. And you did it very smartly and very wisely. So respect. I do think it's important to share this, though, in case you didn't see it. One more note from Todd Archer. This, again, coming in the aftermath of the Joe Milton trade news. After Dak Prescott got hurt last year, Todd tweets, the Cowboys had talks with Trey Lance regarding an extension that obviously never got to the finish line. Lance played well in his one start last year, but he remains unsigned. I think it's smart to, on some level, lowball players. That's probably what this was, right? It was probably a really, really, really low vet minimum offer. And I, on one hand, if I'm now stretching and reaching and coping a little bit, I am a fan of the idea that the Cowboys reached out to Trey Lance, last year. Although, as I say that, I mean, I was kind of reading it again as I was formulating the sentence in my mind. Todd does note after Dak Prescott got hurt last year. Now, this is water under the bridge ultimately, but this point should still be said out loud. This is my job is to, see these things for you and tell you these things. I take my job very seriously. I'm very fortunate, very blessed to have it. Look at the very first words of this. All right. And I'm going to stop it right here. Look at the very first words. This is like, I don't know, like 12 words or like 19 words. I don't know, whatever. After Dak Prescott got hurt last year, the Cowboys had talks with Trey Lance regarding an extension. I stand by everything I said today. I stand by all the flowers I've given the Cowboys front office. And I like the fact that they at least discussed on a mild level, in a literal definition of the word, discussed. I like the fact that they discussed an extension with Trey Lance last year before he got to free agency, right? But if I'm being super picky, the very first words, the very first 5 words, not even the whole highlighted portion, after Dak Prescott got hurt last year. Is that 5 words? Oh, it's like 7 words. It's 7 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, the first 7 words. I don't know why I said 5. After Dak Prescott got hurt last year. So I could rewrite that and say after Trey Lance received more leverage, right? So again, this is a learning process, and I think the Cowboys have clearly learned. I think that, this last month is somewhat representative of that. I'm not saying everything's different, but this, again, I could rewrite in a synonymous way, and it would read, after Trey Lance got more leverage. Imagine being Trey Lance and Dak Prescott gets hurt, and he gets hurt in a game where he gets caught on camera saying, "We effing suck." And they say, "Oh, dude, huge coincidence that we actually were just planning on talking to you about a contract extension." And it seems clear and obvious that Trey bet on himself. And I hate to say that bet didn't work out, but either way, we wish Trey the best. And so whatever. But I think it's safe to say that if you look at all the options that Todd Archer reported in Jacoby Brissett, in Drew Lock, and I guess if you include Trey Lance, like I said, once again, the very best option, the very best outcome was not understandably, was overwhelmingly Joe Milton. And the Cowboys pulled it off. And again, they've pulled off some trades of this variety 3 different times. That doesn't mean the teams who they've traded with, the Buffalo Bills for Kaiir Elam, the Tennessee Titans for Kenneth Murray, and now the New England Patriots for Joe Milton. That doesn't mean they're dumb. That doesn't mean they're wrong or they're silly or we can dunk on them or anything like that. But the Cowboys looked at teams that had players at positions of need, suppressed value players, and said, we think that those are lottery tickets worth taking shots on. And we're not really going to compromise our lottery ticket to trade for, because the Cowboys kept a lottery ticket each single time. They kept a day 3 pick in general. I don't care how big of a fan of the draft you are. A day 3 pick on many levels is a lottery ticket. And the Cowboys kept one each time when they got Elam, when they got Murray, and when they got Milton. And the Cowboys said, okay, like we're saying, a lot of people, it's interesting how the people who were down on the Kaiir Elam trade or the Kenneth Murray trade, I know that there's a little bit more body of work to work with there, but, people say like, oh, the Cowboys just traded for these guys because they were first-round picks. That's basically the same thing here. I know that Joe Milton was a 6th-round pick and not a first-round pick, but he was very highly thought of. We're not that far removed from him being very highly thought of. And the Cowboys said to themselves, you know what? At one point in time, not too far in the rearview mirror, Kaiir Elam was very highly thought of. You know what? Not too long ago in the rearview mirror, Kenneth Murray was very highly thought of. Now, those players have not played that well in the NFL, and obviously that's why they were traded for what they were ultimately traded for. But that being said, I like these trades. I like these trades and how the Cowboys have positioned themselves, because I cover this team. I follow them very closely, more closely than most people. And I don't know exactly what they're going to do in the NFL draft. It's been very easy to telegraph what they're going to do in the draft for a very long time now. But because they have checked these boxes, because they have raised their floor at defensive tackle, at running back, at linebacker, at QB2, at corner, at all these different places that we were sitting here and laughing at them for not addressing for forever, now, at the very least, they have positioned themselves to, you know what, Igbuka's falling. You know what, let's take the running back here. You know what, let's go linebacker. You know what, we really didn't plan on going offensive line, but let's do it. It feels right because of X, Y, and Z. They have allowed themselves to have more options instead of saying, you know what, we got to have Jalen Tolbert here. You know what, we've got to take Sam Williams right now. We're shy at pass rushers. We've got to have him right here, right now. I like that the Cowboys have given themselves outs. They've given themselves room for error. That's the whole point. If you don't want to be spending big in free agency, that's fine. And our attitude has long been, that's okay, but you can't do Nothing. You can't have nobody, because then you get to the draft and you're counting on 7 picks or 10 picks or 4 picks or whatever to come in and be superstars. And now that doesn't have to happen. Now, Kalen Carson doesn't have to come in and save the day because you have other opportunities, you have other potentials, you have other lottery tickets. And that's the smart way to build your roster. Good for you, Cowboys. I'm proud of you. All right, everybody. My name is RJ Ochoa. You can follow me here in the Bleach Report app right down below. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like the video and subscribe. Please do those things. They really help us. You can follow me on social media, X, Instagram, Threads at RJ Ochoa. Search for RJ Ochoa on Blue Sky, RJ.Ochoa on TikTok, RJ.Ochoa at SBNation.com if you want to shoot me an email. Other than that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I will be here next Tuesday. It will be Masters Week. I'm super pumped. I'm super excited. So whatever teams you're rooting for this weekend, unless they're the Mariners or the Twins, I hope everything goes well for you. But all that being said, thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. We will see you next time, and go Cowboys.